Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to think that Hong Kong has so many writers. You're all writers, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be here, or at least you're interested in writing. What I'm going to do with you today, since this is really just an introductory kind of workshop, is I'll give you a brief introduction to the idea of, introduce you to myself and to the idea of the workshop and what that means, okay? And then I'll talk about what normally happens and about the teaching of writing, which is something I do. And then we'll go right into the creative exercises, which will be exercises in reading and writing. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about, for those of you who are interested in pursuing writing further, what you might be able to do on your own, or what kind of courses you might look for to take, or where you could go online for suggestions of things that you could follow up with. And finally, I'll just take some Q&A, okay? Okay, so let's get started. How many of you have written a book? Anybody? Okay, so some of you have. It doesn't have to be published, have actually finished writing a book. How many of you have written some stories or tried to write some stories? All right. How many of you have tried to write what we would call creative nonfiction, memoirs, personal essays, things like that? Okay. And you're all writing in English, or some of you are writing in Chinese too, right? Yeah? Okay, well, today we're talking about English creative writing because I write in English. So as you heard just now, I am a writer. I write stories and novels and essays. This is the main thing I do. And for the past 8 years or so, I've been teaching creative writing. And I generally teach at a master's level. So my students are adult students, actually, because I teach what we call low residency programs. So the students work at a distance, and they only come to the college maybe once or twice a year. And last year, I came back to Hong Kong. I've been teaching like this in Vermont College in the U.S. And last year, I came back to Hong Kong to start a program like that in Hong Kong as well. And this is the second year of the program. And for those of you who are interested, we have brochures. They look like that. And we have a bunch of different writers from around the world that teach in the program. And this is the second year of the program. And we often bring in writers and a whole literary events and things like that. So you can always check that out at City University. And I can talk a little bit more about that later. But what is the writing workshop? How many of you have actually been in a writing workshop before? Anyone taken one? Okay, so your experience is usually not a room quite this big, right? It's maybe 10 people, 12 people, right? You write something, you turn it, and then you all talk about the work. That's basically the idea. The idea of the writing workshop, in fact, the thing that we call the writer's workshop started 70-something years ago at the University of Iowa. It's about 70, 75 years ago. And today, you know, that was the first Master of Fine Arts program in creative writing. And it's sort of like, you know how a painter or an artist is learning to paint, they would do studio, they go into a studio to learn how to paint. A dancer would take dance classes in a sort of studio as well. Well, writers do the same thing, except that it's not quite as glamorous as painters or singers or dancers. We just sit around the table and we talk about the work and we read, because that's what writers do. We write and read. So that's basically the idea of a workshop. So because today's program is just an introduction to the idea, I can't really do what we would call an actual workshop where each of you write something and turn it in and we all read it and all talk about it, because it would be kind of impossible to do it. But that is the fundamental idea. And later I'll tell you a little bit more about where you can find these kinds of workshops and programs to participate in. So the question is, can writing be taught? Well, I referred just now to music, to dance, to painting. All these are artistic disciplines that are taught. And personally, I think, yes, writing can be taught. Does it help if you're sort of very talented? Probably, if you have a very good sense of language, if you love to read, all these things make a difference. But can you teach the fundamentals of writing? Can you teach somebody how to draw even though they are not the most artistic? I think you can. It's just a question of what level you want to go to, that's all. And I think everybody finds where they are most comfortable. So that's the idea. So here we don't start with any assumptions that you should become this great literary genius or anything. This is just an introduction to the idea of, I like the idea that maybe I could write a story or write an essay or write a memoir or write a book, okay? So let's start with that idea. So, what makes a person able to say, I am a writer? What do you think? Is it because you've published 10 books? Maybe, but I don't think that's the most important thing. Or is it because you write? If you dance, if you sing, aren't you a singer or a dancer? If you write, you are a writer. And how do you begin to think of yourself as a writer? Well, here's what happens when, okay, I've been writing for a long time. I started when I was 11 years old, and I never stopped, so I still do it. I started publishing when I was 11, too. When I meet other writers, when I go to literary festivals or things like the book fair and I meet other writers, what do you think writers say to each other? After we say hello, the first thing we usually ask when I see my writer friends, and I have writer friends from all over the world, I ask 2 questions. What are you writing? What are you reading? I assume you all like to read. That's why you're here, right? There's not much point to write if you don't read. These are the 2 questions writers ask each other. What do you write? What are you writing? What are you reading? And I emphasize that because I think that reading is where it starts. I loved to read when I was a kid. My mother used to want me to go outside to play. I wanted to stay at home and read. And that's the reason I'm a writer today. I don't think that if you don't like reading, or if you can't be bothered to read, or you don't think you have enough time to read, that there's any point in writing. Is there? Really? So let's begin from the idea that in order to write, you have to read. Okay, let's start with that first exercise. You all got the handout, right? Have you all read it? Anybody want to take a little time to read it? Okay, we're going to do a very democratic thing. We're going to vote. Let's pretend you've gone into a bookstore and you've read all these passages, which are by different writers, okay? But you only have enough money to buy one of the books. Having read this opening paragraph, this excerpt from the story or memoir or whatever it is, which one, and you can only choose one, which one would you choose? All right, let's start there. And I'll go down each one, and you can all put up your hands and vote for it, okay? So let's start with are you all ready? You all pick the one that you want? Okay? Anybody wants a little bit more time? All right. Let's say the first one. Suppose it is an autumn day, fine and clear and cool. Anybody want to vote for this one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7 votes. Now you can only vote once, okay? Okay, let me just... So we have 7 for the... God. Seven for the first one. Okay, the second one. Number 2. On a hot September afternoon, my friend's daughter sits with her dolls in a galvanized steel tub. Anybody vote for this one? 1, 2? Okay, 2 people. So the poor author at least gets 2 books, 2 royalties. Number 3. An easy operation, my friend had said, by way of calming my fears. Anybody want to vote for this one? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 votes, okay. Number 4, it begins, beautiful girls, our daughter looks like a South China peasant with those red cheeks, my father complains. Anybody going to vote for this one? Oh, quite a few. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Something in this list must be really popular that will get a lot, I think, right? Number 5. This is how we count the days. June, the Germans come to the island. Football cleats, big T-shirts, thick tongues, speaking like spitting. Anybody want to vote for this one? 1, 2, 3. Anybody else? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 3 votes. Next one, number 6. Sometimes I wonder if my father will ever grow up. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 7. All right. No overwhelming one yet. Let's see. Number 7. She was meeting a man she had recently and abruptly fallen in love with. Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7 people. We'll give that one the vote. A lot of 7s. Okay. Number 8. That first night in my new place was very strange. I had no furniture, so I lay down on the floor. Anybody? 1. Oh, quite a lot of people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 for number 8. My. Number 9, the beginning of the end. Boston, 1986. Elizabeth stared at the coffee stain on the table. 1 person. Okay. That's good. There's always 1 person who will at least buy the book. Okay. Number 10. Every Thursday at noon, I have sex with Rick in room 213 of the Rainbow Motel. Anybody want to? 1? Just 1? Oh dear. Nobody likes stories about sex? Number 11. It was a wife's worst nightmare. Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 4 people. Number 12. When the weather is good or when I'm tired of having 7 million neighbors, I drive north from downtown Beijing. Anybody? 1? That's it? Oh dear. I guess we don't want to read about Beijing, huh? Maybe we know too much about Beijing already here. That could be why. We want something different. Number 13. There was a time, hard to imagine now, when the Japanese fell in love with China. Anybody? 1. Okay. I thought this was a rather interesting one. It's a little different than other things I've read. Number 14. I didn't start writing until I was 47. I had always wanted to write, but thought you needed a degree or membership in a club nobody had asked me to join. Anybody? Okay, that got a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ooh, yes. Okay. And finally, no, not quite finally yet. Number 15. He hated the restaurant from the moment he saw the waiter. Wore an earring like a bloody woman. Anybody? Okay, 1, 2. Back there? 3. Okay. So 3. Number 16. On a late spring morning in New York City 4 years ago, while walking on Broadway, I suddenly noticed that something terrible had happened to Strauss Park. Anybody? Okay, got a few. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. Okay. Number 17, I steal. Okay. This always gets a lot of votes. I wonder why. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Ooh, everybody likes stealing, right? Okay. Let's talk about these pieces, all right? We got the biggest votes, 22 for number 17. I steal. I've stolen books and money and even letters. Letters are great. I can't tell you the feeling walking down the street with $20 in my purse, stolen earrings in my pocket. Why do you like this one? Why do you want to read this one? Tell me, somebody who chose it. Okay, she says it's the honesty of I steal that gets your attention. It's intriguing, but you don't know what's going to happen next. How many of you think you know what's going to happen next? Anybody? No, it is a very intriguing voice. It is a very unusual opening. And this is the opening of a story, okay? And every time I've used this in all the workshops I teach, this is the one that gets often the most votes. Not always, but often the most votes. Anybody else want to tell me about it? It's a confession, yes. It has emotion, energy. It feels like a rush, you said, okay? So the words, you know, when I say that one of the things we do as writers is that we learn to read like writers, it's how does the writer get that effect? Well, look at the sentences. They're kind of short. They move, right? I steal. 2 words, 1 sentence, right? I've stolen books and monies and even letters. Letters are great. See the variance of rhythm? Right away, you get that movement there, all right? So that's part of it. Okay, let's look at another one. Which one got a lot of votes? Let's see. Number 2. Number 8, was it? Yes, number 8 got 21 votes. Let's look at number 8. That first night in my new place was very strange. I had no furniture, so I lay down on the floor, but I was used to that. The thing I wasn't ready for was the feeling of being alone in the dark, without the muffled noises of other bodies, the snoring of biggest brother, and the creak of the old wooden floor as it moved under our shifting weight. The night seemed terribly empty. I couldn't sleep. Why is this one so intriguing? Why do you want to read this one? Why are you going to spend money and buy this book? Who chose this one? Somebody chose it. 21 people chose it. You want to tell me why you chose it? Okay, you got a glimpse of danger and curiosity. Yes, it does make you sort of curious. Why? What's going on? What else? What else can you tell me about it that made it so interesting? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, there's a place. We know where it is, right? It's in Kowloon. So right away you know, oh, if I read this book, it's a book that's set in Kowloon, right? It raises questions. It raises questions. This is an interesting thing. I mean, if you're going to read something, do you want to open the book and on the first page know exactly what's going to happen? Of course not. There's a little suspense here. There's some questions here. There are things that spark your curiosity. That makes a difference. That makes you want to read it a little further, right? So that's part of it. Anything else about it? I'll put it up a little further, then you can see the whole thing. what is that? That sounds like is the room of this person at night, you know, something strange happening. Okay, it's quite vivid. You know, you get the feeling that the person is feeling lying there at night, right? So this is all part of it. It creates a picture in your mind. That's what this one does. And that's one of the reasons. This is often quite popular, too, when I put it up. Okay? So let's look at other ones which got maybe 7 votes or something like that. Because I think there were a few that got 7. The first one, okay, number 1. At least 7 people said they wanted to buy this book. Suppose it is an autumn day, fine and clear and cool, late afternoon when the sun nears the horizon and turns the sky into a watercolor of pastels. It is beautiful, as though God is showing off. As you approach the city, you first see its wall, an immense gray brick structure that is solid as it is imposing, nearly as wide as it is high, some 30 feet. Why do you want to read this one? Mm-hmm. Hmm? Okay, you said something very interesting. You said the writer mentions God. I believe in God, so I want to read about it. How many of us pick things to read because something in the book that we pick up speaks to something that we personally understand and identify with? Yeah, I do, you know. I want to know about things that are interesting to me. I want to know about things that I believe in, that I have an interest in. And also you said that it's the colors, so that's also, it concocts an image in your head if you think about it that way. Hmm? Okay. Yeah? Uh-huh. You're brought into the story right away. Mm-hmm. This is very interesting, too. I think if you're going to read like a writer, you read actively. You participate. You know, we can read to escape. When I was a kid, I read a lot of escapist stuff. I read a lot of mystery stories. I love mysteries because I didn't have to think too hard about it. I just had to try to solve the mystery. And after I had read 100 mystery books, I could pretty much solve any mystery story that you put in front of me. And I learned a great deal about plot. But then today I can't read mysteries anymore because I kind of know the answer by the time I start, you know. and this is a problem because there's a formula there. But this one invites you into something else. It's like the writer is saying, come with me. I am going to take you with me. Suppose it is an autumn day. So suddenly you are there with the writer, with that voice, telling you to be a part of this autumn day, to look at this city, to look at this wall. And the writer also says something rather interesting. It is beautiful, as though God is showing off. You know, suddenly God does something active here, showing off, you know. And so that's a little unusual, too. Let me pick 1 or 2 others. And then... Number 6, 7 people wanted that. Sometimes I wonder if my father will ever grow up. Take the day when this all started, for instance. When I got home from school, I heard his excited voice rattling out of the study, going a mile a minute, obviously not listening too closely to the person on the other end of the phone, because whoever it was couldn't have gotten a word in sideways. Now, I remember some of you laughed when you picked this one. Why do you want to read this one? There were some people at the back, that side, I think, right? Who's going to tell me? Yeah? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. The action? Connection. Okay, you can connect to the idea of, here's the father, and look at that first sentence. Sometimes I wonder if my father will ever grow up. Sometimes I wonder if my father will ever grow up. Usually it is the father who says, I wonder what it'll be like when my son or daughter grows up. But here we have the child saying, so we reverse things. It's a little bit surprising. It's not exactly the point of view you expect. Okay? So that makes a little bit of a difference too. Oh, the next one. That one got a lot of votes too, got 7 votes. She was meeting a man she had recently and abruptly fallen in love with. She was in a state of ghastly anxiety. He was married, for one thing, to a Korean woman whom he described as the embodiment of all that was feminine and elegant. There were some people here who liked this one. Why did you want to read this one? People either hate this one or like this one a lot. Anybody want to tell me why they chose this one? Who chose it? Somebody chose it. Anybody else want to talk about it? Yeah. It describes feminine energy and in a contrasting way. And I think contrast is always interesting when you read something. I mean, if everything's just the same, that's not so exciting. It doesn't incite any curiosity or interest. But something like this, where it's 2 very contrasting images of a woman, of womanhood, right away gives us something to begin with. So do you get the idea then of what might be interesting to us as writers and readers and what matters? I'm going to now hand out, if somebody can help me at the back there, if you can all help, I'm going to hand out to you the key to these opening paragraphs. How many of you recognized any of these? Did you recognize any of these openings? Anybody? Which one did you recognize? One of them is Jhumpa Lahiri's story. That's number, where was it? Number 11. Number 11 was a story by Jhumpa Lahiri. Anybody else recognize anything? Yeah? Which one? Who is that? Yep. It's a story by Ratuwat Laprachonsep, a Thai-American writer. And it's from his collection of stories called Sightseeing, and the title of that story is Farangs. Do you know the word Farang, which is, of course, the Thai reference? It's like saying Guailo, but it's the Thai way of saying it. Okay. Any other one you recognize? I mean, many of these are quite well-known authors, or well-known books. But here's the key for you so that you can see who they are. Do you all have the handout? Okay. I want to talk briefly about narrative, because what we're talking about in all of this, in whether you're writing a memoir, creative nonfiction, or whether you're writing a novel or a short story, there is this idea of narrative. And and how a story moves. How do you tell the story? And one of the things I often say in introductory workshops in creative writing, I say that I have a way of thinking about storytelling. I say that in order to write a story, there are 5 P's. Now, you want to guess what these 5 P's are? You need these 5 P's. Passion? No. That's something that maybe you as the writer should bring to it, but, you know. But that's again something, but no. What does the story actually need in terms of technique? Plot. Somebody said plot. Okay. Somebody said perspective. Very good. Usually nobody gets perspective. What else? 3 more. Place. Very good. Yes. People. Yes, even if they're animals, they're people, right? Like Animal Farm. One last one. You could, but that's usually in the plot. Yeah. This is something we call point of view. Or we often shorten it to POV when we talk about it. So what do we mean by all these? Well, plot. What's a plot? The structure of the story. What else is a plot? I'm sorry? How it develops. How something develops, yes? E.M. Forster, how many of you have read E.M. Forster? Passage to India, things like that. He had a very interesting thing to say about plot. He says, the king died and then the queen died. That's a story. The king died and then the queen died of grief. That's a plot. What's the difference? There's a reason for the story, right? A plot is more than just a sequence of events. This, you know, first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. That's okay. You need to know that. But the more important thing you need to know as a writer is, why is all this happening? So let's say you tell the story, you want to write a memoir about your father who is passed away now, who was a very difficult man, let's say. Okay? So let's start with the question of, well, why are you telling the story even? You know? What's so important about your dad that you need to tell that story? I often prompt my students to think about why they're writing something. And when you're constructing a plot, if you're trying to write a piece of fiction, you want to know why this particular story. Let's say you say, one morning, so-and-so woke up and he found out that he had turned into a cockroach. So why this morning? Why not the next morning? Why not 3 years ago? Why today? Why now? It's all those whys that are interesting. And in plot, very often you want to think about why. Let's talk about place next, okay? Place is sort of obvious. You know, many of you said, oh, the one about, which is actually Jackie Chan's book, The First Night in My New Place Was Very Strange. He didn't actually write it. He had a co-author who wrote it for him. But it's his story, okay? And somebody said, well, it's in Kowloon, so I know where we are. So naming a place can be useful, but even if the place is not, say it's not a real place, say it's something like Harry Potter, you know, that's not a real place. But why is Harry Potter so popular? Because you can picture this place. You can see this world that has been created for you. The place is important in the story. I think a lot of beginning writers, you know, they say, oh, well, it's what's going on in the head of the person. But even if you can make that head feel like a place that you want to visit, then it's that much more interesting. So place is always important in any story. People. Why do we bother to write, you know? Because we want to know about people, whether it's people in history, people in the future, people today or people who act an awful lot like animals. It doesn't matter, Animal Farm, one of those famous books in literature. It's all animals, right? But it's all people, really, as we know. Without people, there is no conflict. Without conflict, there is no drama. So people, obviously, the characters that you develop, and if you're writing a short story, for example, you might have one particular character, what we call the protagonist in the story or in the drama. You spend a lot of time figuring out that person. And one of the things I do when I write novels, I have to figure out what it feels like to be that person. And this can be very challenging if it's somebody who is a lot younger or a lot older than me, different culture, different race, different gender. So you go around different profession. One example I sometimes talk about, I wrote a novel called The Unwalled City, which was set in Hong Kong, and one of the main characters was a photographer. I'm not a photographer, so I carried a camera around for weeks, months, and just kept walking around town. And I would keep trying to take pictures. I'm a lousy photographer, but I wanted to try to look through a camera eye on a regular basis because that's what photographers do, So that's the kind of research we do, You can also do, of course, library research, which is useful, but it was a way of trying to get into that character's head. Point of view. On the most fundamental level, you can write in the first person, I, right? You can write in the third person, he, she, they. These are the two most common points of view. One of the things that we often say that if you're trying to write a story of any kind, one of the most important decisions to make is what point of view to use. Should you write it in first person? Should you write it in third person? The advantage of third person is that it allows you to enter a lot of different people's points of view. So if you're writing a novel, you're trying to write a book, for example, about a whole world of people, you're able then to enter these different points of view and show what the story is like from this character or that other character. The advantage of first person, it feels a lot more personal. It feels very intimate. What's the problem with first person? It's totally unreliable. You have to try to establish the reliability of that voice. But everything is only seen from one point of view if it's an I. And that can be difficult. And that can be very tricky. Teaching people how to manage the first person and still tell a story of what's going on. Because let's say I am the main character and I write in the first person. I go, I walk into the room. Immediately I can't see what's behind me, can I? I can't describe that unless I turn around. So it gets rather tedious. If you want to say that something else is going on behind the person, how do you do that? It's much easier in third person. You can also write in second person, you. It's a little bit more stylized to do that. I wouldn't recommend it as a starting point, but it can be done. It has a curious kind of voice, but it needs to be very carefully structured. You can write in first person plural, we. Okay? You can write in third person that is almost like first person, where you're very, very close to the character all the time. Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf's famous novel, is that kind of very close third person. It was something that sort of began in the early 20th century, where you enter very closely into the consciousness of the character, and you don't describe so much of the external landscape. Everything is seen from a very close and interior point of view. Okay? So the point of view is one of those decisions you have to make. If you're writing memoir, you're telling your own story, you might think at first that, well, I can only use the I. Well, maybe, but that's not always true, because there are plenty of memoirs and there are plenty of sort of nonfiction stories that are told in the third person. And if you're writing, say, a historical account or a biographical account of somebody else, you can use third person too. And the final thing that I think is probably, to me, the most interesting thing is what I call perspective, meaning the authorial perspective. What you, as the author, are bringing to the story. The passion, perhaps, or a burning curiosity to learn something about a particular point in history. That's why you've spent a lot of time researching it. The obsession you have. But it's the thing that's in the writer that says, I really, really, really have to write this. Because if that's there in your piece, then maybe somebody else will really, really, really have to read it. I want you to think about the pieces that you looked at just now. And, some of them not that many people selected. For example, number 2. Let's just look at that for a minute. I think only 2 people chose that one. Now here I'm going to ask the opposite question. Why didn't you choose this one? It doesn't seem interesting. It seems too narrow a kind of maybe world or something like that. Okay, that's part of it. But it is this writer's world. Another one that didn't get a lot of choices, I think. Oh, number 10. I said, doesn't anybody want to read about sex? Every Thursday at noon, I have sex with Rick in room 213 of the Rainbow Motel. How come you didn't want to read this one? It becomes not what you think it is. It goes into a very flat kind of world. Yeah. Maybe drawing too much attention to the moment. That it feels contrived. There's a reason for that if you know what the larger context of this is. This is a memoir about a woman who was a victim of incest when she was younger. So sex, obviously, is not a horrible thing, okay? So it becomes a very opposite kind of thing. You can't always tell from, I mean, it's not fair, obviously, to judge a book by one paragraph, right? They were either the opening paragraph of something or the opening section of a part. If it's from a book, this was not the opening. Number 10 was not the opening of the book, but it was an opening chapter section or section heading, that sort of thing. I tried to find things that were sort of something that led to something else, But most of them are from the opening of the story or the book or the essay or whatever. But not necessarily if it's a book, in which case it could be a section. But you think about your own writing that way. If you were just to pull out a sentence, a paragraph like I've done here, how would it be judged? Because that's what you sort of do in a workshop setting. You're judging, you're deciding, well, I want to read that, I don't want to read that. What about the subject matter? We can't be interested in everything, right? But we can only write what we are interested in. How do we know anybody else is going to be interested in it? This is the risk you take as a writer. You want to be a writer, that's the risk you take, okay? All right, let's do a little exercise. I'd like you each to try to write an opening paragraph of a story, a piece, or whatever it is you want to write. Just write 2 or 3 lines of an opening section. It doesn't even have to be a whole paragraph of whatever it is you want to write. And as you do it, think about those 5 Ps and, because, if you look through the list that we read, the handout that we read, some of these obviously have more about people, some have more about place, some are very much in the voice of one person, the point of view of one person. So choose whatever you want. You can choose one of the Ps and make that bigger. But just try writing a few sentences. And then I'm going to ask for a few volunteers to lend me their sentences. So you can take about 5 minutes to do that. You can come back and get your books back if you want, those of you. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 5 sentences here. So I'm going to read them, and we're going to vote, because you're going to pick the one that you would continue to read, having read this opening sentence. Number 1, she hates herself for being so stupid. Okay. Number 2, it was 5:30 a.m. on a bright Sunday morning. Number 3, as she stood quietly on the balcony, a soft, cool breeze blowing through her long brown hair, she wondered. Number 4, bang, whiz, pop. Number 5, the Lord is my shepherd. Okay, how many votes for number 1? Okay. I would say roughly 25 to 30, okay? All right, number 1, you've sold your book. Number 2, it was 5:30 a.m. on a bright Sunday morning. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, at least 2 people want to read it. Number 3, as she stood quietly in the balcony, a soft breeze blowing through her long brown hair, she wondered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Bang, whiz, pop. A lot of people. About 20, 15 or 20. Okay, so 15 to 20, let's say. Oops, sorry. And number 5, the Lord is my shepherd. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 4. All right, the first one was clearly the most popular choice. You want to tell me why? She hates herself for being so stupid. Do we all feel like that sometimes? Yeah. I think the things that we respond to quickly doesn't necessarily mean this is the best story or anything like that. And this is the important thing. It is how we respond. We respond sometimes very sort of directly because this is what we can identify with. But is reading only about that? Is reading also about trying to discover something that you don't know or haven't felt? Or it is something new? So I invite you to think about that. Why do we go towards something that we are attracted to? Well, what attracts us in reading? But is that the only way to think about books and stories and the things we read if we want to write? Because you have to consider that what you want to write may not be that kind of thing that everybody can identify with, but it is still the thing that you want to write. So maybe as writers, you also ought to read more broadly. Number 2 was the one that got only 2. Okay, it was 5:30 a.m. on a bright Sunday morning. Yeah. The possibilities are there. So maybe you're a reader who's willing to suspend judgment and wait to see what could happen. All right. You know, one of the things about figuring out what to write, how to write, you got to figure out what kind of reader you are and what kind of writer you want to be. Because think about all these different voices, how different they are. Here we have just 5 people from this audience, this random audience that came here in Hong Kong. And every one of these could be a story, could be a book, all right? Here we have a much longer sentence than the rest. Number 3, as she stood quietly in the balcony, a soft, cool breeze blowing through her long brown hair, she wondered. Some of you chose that. Why did you choose that one? Who chose that one? There were some people back there who chose it. I saw hands. No one's going to tell me? Yes. makes you wonder, right? Okay, so you're left with a little suspense, all right? So for those of you who like a little suspense, that's sort of nice. Also, there's a question of language. I mean, this language in the number 3 is very different from the language in Bang, Whiz, Pop, number 4, that a lot of people liked. Why do we like that one? Some of you chose that one. Why do you like that one? It grabs attention right away. It gets your attention right off the bat. You know, so attention grabbing works on first sentences. But then again, sometimes things are a lot quieter, like number 5, which is a statement, which is something that we recognize. It comes from a prayer. The Lord is my shepherd, right? But it appealed to some of you. Why did you choose that one? Yeah. Who's saying this? Yeah. Right. Right. Why is this person saying that? What's behind this? So you're interested in the voice. Think of all the many reasons that we choose something to read or that we're drawn to something. That's what it's going to do to you too. Okay, you're going to do part 2 of your writing exercise. Look at your paragraph that you've written and think about which of the 5 P's that we talked about earlier, let me put that up again, is the dominant one in your paragraph. Is it plot? Is it perspective? Is it place? Is it people? Is it point of view? If we look at the 5 examples we have here, the first one, she hates herself for being so stupid. We're really in a point of view right away, right? We are in that person's point of view. So that's the stronger thing. There's no place in this sentence. There's no anything else right now, okay? It was 5:30 a.m. on a bright Sunday morning. We're talking about plot. Something's going to happen, right? We don't know what, but here's a plot-driven first line. Number 3, as she stood quietly in the balcony, a soft, cool breeze blowing through her long brown hair, she wondered. So we have the person, we have a woman. We know she's got long brown hair. So we're really seeing people here, right? We're seeing the person more than anything else. And a little bit of a plot because, you know, we've got wind blowing, so it's a cool breeze, okay? What's bang, whiz, pop? We don't know, do we? You know, I kind of like that. It's like, it could be anything, right? But it's sort of plot-driven, you know, some excitement, some energy there. And also maybe a little bit about language, which is not a P, per se. And the Lord is my shepherd, maybe a voice, maybe a point of view, something's happening. Or maybe the perspective dominates here. Maybe this is the authorial perspective that's guiding this piece, okay? So think about the P that dominates in your opening paragraph. And then I want you to rewrite it. I want you to take some other P and write it from that perspective. So if you have a very plot-driven one, use place. You have a place-driven one, use people. Okay? Find the same thing, yes. Find the thing that's the most dominant in your piece and switch it around and see what happens. How many of you found this very difficult to do? Difficult. How many of you found it very easy to do? All right. How many of you found it somewhere in between? That's what most people find it. This is the concept of revision. This is also the concept of looking at your own story from more than one standpoint. I'm going to give you homework, but you don't have to give it to me because it's not that kind of class, right? Take that piece home and write a little bit more of it. Write it out to at least, a couple of pages using each of those openings. And then ask yourself, what is my story really about? Or what is my piece really about? And then go back in again and revise it. This is a little bit of the creative process that I wanted to just share with you. It's one way of trying to get at what it is you're trying to write. Okay? There's no one answer to anybody's way of doing it, because everybody has slightly different ways. Just like I can't tell you that the best way to be a writer is that you must wake up every morning at exactly 6 o'clock, make yourself a cup of tea, and then write. I mean, I could tell you that, but that's not true. That might be true for one person, but not another. The thing you have to do if you really want to write, if you really want to be a writer, is figure out what your own creative process is, what kind of writer you are, and most of all, what kind of story you're trying to tell. What is it you really want to write, and why are you writing it? These are the things that you could spend time writing a journal about. A good habit for writers, of course, is to keep a notebook, carry it around with you. I have a notebook. I always have a notebook somewhere. These days I have my cell phone as well where I can put notes into it. And just take notes and just jot down your thoughts. This is a very basic, fundamental thing that you hear a lot of writers tell you to do. It's true. It works. And then think about what it is you're reading at any given time and what it is you're writing. Because these are the two things that make you a writer, to read and to write. That's all. It's really that simple. Okay? Now, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to tell you about things you could do if you're interested in trying to pursue writing a little further. The first place I would look, if I were you, is online. Because today, it's so easy to get online and find there are online writing courses. There are writers groups online that you can work with. And just see what you can find. If you are writing, say, science fiction or fantasy, Google that. Look for those kinds of groups that are interested in that. Go out and do some research and find it. In Hong Kong itself, you have some possibilities. Space used the Hong Kong University Space. I used to teach some creative writing classes for them, and I think they still teach them. I'm not sure who's teaching it now. But look for courses. Today in Hong Kong, there are two programs that are like the one I talked about the one I teach at City University. It's a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. So we have one program. Hong Kong University has another program too. So you can look into that. Now, because that is a postgraduate program, you of course have to have your bachelor's degree in order to apply. I can't tell you about Hong Kong U's program, but I can tell you about ours that we do require to submit a writing sample to get into the program. And it is competitive. This is our second year. I can tell you why we're competitive, and you can take this away. There's a printout here of a book cover. It's called Cities of Sameness, and it's by Nicholas Wong. Nicholas is one of our students. He's just completed 1 year with us, and he sold his first book of poems to a press in New York. That's what we're trying to train, all right? We're trying to train people who really want to be writers. But having said that, I believe that the study of creative writing is a good education. You read a lot, you write a lot. Whether you become the next Nobel Prize winner is not important. But we ask that the people who come to apply to our program understand that there is a level of seriousness that we expect. Here's another example. We bring in famous writers. Junot Diaz, some of you probably have heard of him. He won the Pulitzer Prize in Literature for his novel. He's coming to our university, and he's actually going to be giving a free program on this Sunday. So all you have to do, if you're interested, there's some flyers out there, and he's giving a reading and a talk. That's the public part. But what we do in bringing him in is that for our students, we have a special exclusive session where he talks with them and works with them and teaches them. In the spring, we brought in Robert Olin Butler, who is also a Pulitzer Prize writer. Last year, we brought in Fei Mayan Ng as a visiting writer who also did work with our students. We also have Tabish Kher, who is visiting the book fair. He's coming to visit our students also. So that's the kind of program we did. And last year, when we launched the program, we brought Timothy Moe, and he did a special student session just for our students. That's part of what, our program offers. So you can pick those up, and we also have brochures. So that's one thing you can do. But let's say you're not ready to do something like spend 2 years of your life doing a master's degree. There are groups in Hong Kong. There is the Writers' Circle, the Hong Kong Writers' Circle, which is an English language writers group, and they get together and they run their own workshops. I think you pay a very nominal membership fee once a year. For those of you who are interested in poetry, there are regular poetry readings. The longest standing one is a group called Out Loud, and they meet once a month, usually the first Wednesday of the month at the Fringe. And anybody can get up and read their poems there, which is a really nice thing. And very often they have visiting writers, or they have, sometimes the well-known writers who are here attending something else, and they come and they read their poems, and you get to meet other writers. And there are also some prose writers as well. It's mostly poets, but you have a lot of other people doing that. And there is another reading group that I know of. I can't remember the name of them, but they meet somewhere in Jordan, in the Jordan area. Do you know the name of Kubrick Poetry Reading Group? So you can Google them, Kubrick, Kubrick. And they hold poetry readings and not just poetry, prose readings as well, too. These are some of the groups I'm aware of. And for those of you who maybe are in secondary school, most of the universities now do teach some creative writing. But definitely Chinese U does, Hong Kong U does. Certainly City University, our undergraduate program, we teach creative writing. Lingnan does a little bit of that too. So at least these, and I believe Poly also teaches some creative writing. So all the universities do offer it at the undergraduate level. So for those of you who are in secondary school and you're interested in writing, think about when you choose your universities, which ones have programs or courses that you can take, okay? So these are the choices that are there. But I would say just get online and see what the rest of the world offers you. If you're writing in English, you're crossing that language boundary anyway. So that's certainly something. For example, UCLA teaches creative writing courses online. I taught a course for them once about 4 years ago. It was entirely online. So you don't have to go to California to take it. And you get good teachers there too who run they're like 10-week courses. Okay, they're not very expensive. The other thing you can go to, there are lots of writers' festivals. Like Hong Kong has a literary festival once a year. And quite often, when the writers come, they also offer workshops as well. So you can go to those and attend those and find out about them. In the summertime, a lot of universities in the UK and in America offer these 1-2 week courses. You can check them out. And you can just go. Anybody can go and take it. You don't have to. You may have to submit a manuscript to get into these workshops, but it's not that hard to get in. It's not like trying to get into a university degree program. The University of Iowa, which is one of the most famous writing schools, they have regular summer programs which are about 1 or 2 weeks long, and many, many other universities offer that too. So there are a lot of possibilities. These are the things you can do. I was going to leave the last 10 minutes to just open it for Q&A. So if anybody has questions, they're going to bring the mics around to you, and I'm supposed to stand here and talk. Okay, does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask? Okay, you want to take the mic around to them so they can ask the question?
Testing.
Yeah, there's one over there.
Oh, sorry.
American Psycho, Bret Easton Ellis. That's a novel that's written from the second-person point of view. There's not a lot that comes to mind easily for that.
Also, considering to point of view, do you ever use an unreliable narrator? And if so,
oh yes.
Why?
Why not write an unreliable narrator? One of my favorite unreliable narrator books is very painful book to read. It's called The Diary of a Rapist. This is by nature unreliable already. The guy's a little off his rocker. There's a reason to get into the heads of people who are either a little offbeat, but unreliable doesn't necessarily mean crazy or criminal. It's not that simple. I steal, is that not a slightly unreliable narrator? Do you really believe this voice? Go look up the story. It's a very famous story. I remember when I first read it, when it first came out in the New Yorker many years ago in the 80s. It's a famous story in American short fiction. Go read it. You'd be surprised at what it is. To write Chinese voices. Yeah. Words. Yeah. How do you render another language into English? Well, this is a tricky question. And the first question I'd ask you to think about is, well, why do I want to write it in English? Why don't I just write it in Chinese? Okay? All right, so let's say you've answered that question. I want to write it in English, like I do, for example. I write. Well, my reason for writing in English is I can't write in Chinese. My Chinese is terrible. Okay, but I speak Cantonese. So what do I do if I want to render Cantonese dialogue? Let's say I have two characters and they're speaking Cantonese. Okay, so then it sort of depends what the context of it is. You can use, let's say it's two rather formal Chinese people. I have one story which is two older people. One is principally a Mandarin speaker, but he lives in Hong Kong. Now, he's from Beijing. He's moved to Hong Kong, and so he can speak Cantonese, but his Cantonese is always with an accent. And the other is a Hong Kong Chinese woman, but she's a very well-educated, the daughter of art dealers, antique dealers. So the language I used was somewhat formal. So I chose a more formal construction for it to render the kind of language they would be speaking. And every so often, I would play between the English, between the Cantonese and the Mandarin for them. I would put in a little bit of Cantonese romanization and a little bit of Mandarin pinyin, in other words, just to render it without actually translating it. That's one trick you can use. Now, then I had two young Hong Kong Chinese girls. One, they're about 20-something. One works for Citibank, I think she did. And then the other one is trying to be a jazz singer, you know. They both came back from Canada. So they code switch. They speak English Cantonese. But I decided to use a kind of American slang for them because that was the closest I could think of for the kind of wow, you know, that kind of thing. And every so often I would have like wow, ayah, you know, that kind of sort of expression in there, which is very Cantonese, okay? So these are some of the ways. You can use translation too, of course. It's a little clunkier, but sometimes it's appropriate. So I think it depends on the context of what you're trying to do. Question?
I just wondered what the name of those two stories were that
Which,
you just told us about.
Oh,
so I'd like to go and read them.
The first one was called Until the Next Century. It's a short story set at, you know, New Year's Eve before the millennium, and it's in my collection, History's Fiction. And then the other one is from my novel, The Unwalled City, these two gals, and Dana and Clio. They were lots of fun to write because I'm a lot older than them, and I had to try to hear them in my head. And I kept hearing the way they would chat. They were two best friends, you know, grew up together. Yeah. Do you want this?
How do you teach students to be interested in reading and doing creative writing if you're a secondary school teacher?
This is the reason I don't teach secondary school. I know it's tough. You know, one of the things I've done in life is I've edited 3 anthologies. I co-edited 2 and I edited 1 anthology of Hong Kong writing in English. Because I felt that when I was growing up here, and I wanted to be a writer, I had to go away because, you know, I like to read, but nobody else, it seemed, around me was that interested. But my aunt was she's my late aunt. She's dead now. She taught in the local schools, and when I was this was back in the 70s, I wrote a story that the BBC broadcast, and it was about the subway, and it was about a little boy on the subway, and she used that for teaching, and she said, I want to use your story. I said, okay, and I didn't understand why she wanted it. She said, because it's local, it's set in Hong Kong. So the students can identify with it. So one thing I think that's sort of missing in the way we teach literature here, it's all very well to have us read Charles Dickens and, you know, Mrs. Dalloway or whatever and all these English books and everything. But it's not the world that the people are from. Literature emerges from where you are. So I think it's actually 2 suggestions I would make. One is to maybe teach some of the local writing that's in translation. So even if it's like Sai-Sai's books, for example, are translated, I find that that's something that people have found interesting. Or, you know, we have some local poets and writers, and if you look at these anthologies, you'll find them. Okay? Because the last anthology I edited, I actually put out a call for submissions, and a lot of them are young people, completely unknown, you know, like university students and things like that. And they write about much more local concerns, and they sound like Hong Kong people. And I think that that's part of the reason people kind of lost interest here, because the literature seems so foreign. You know, it needs to have some more local kind of context. Actually, at Lingnan University, they teach a course called Asian Voices in English. And I think if you look at some of these Asian voices, which that's one of the reasons the creative writing program I teach, we have a focus on sort of Asian writing in English, because, you know, if you're sitting in Asia, it doesn't matter whether you're Caucasian or Asian or mixed or whatever the hell you are, you know, you're looking at the world here. And so this world is what we write about. I think that part of it is to interest young people especially. There are two ways you do it. You can capture their imagination like Harry Potter did, or you can also make the literature seem like it's part of their real world.
So what are you reading and writing these days?
What am I
and why?
reading? Yeah. I'm reading a couple of novels. I'm reading a book called The Slap, and it's the writer's name is a Greek name. He won the Commonwealth Novel Prize. And the reason I'm reading that one was one of my colleagues said, you got to read this book. And I thought, okay, so I just got it on the Kindle, and it's really good. And it's really exciting. This writer is doing several points of view. So you have all these different characters. The incident that takes place is it's a barbecue, and one child is behaving very bad. There's a whole lot of family and extended family and friends and all this. And one kid is really behaving badly, and one guy gets kind of a little fed up of this kid, and he slaps him. And the parents have a fit. That's the incident, okay? And we start to hear the story from all the different points of view of all the different characters. I'm only about a third of the way through. It's really interesting. I've read now 3 different characters' points of view. Okay, so I like the structure of that. I like the way, the ambition of that book. And the other book that I'm reading is something called Turn of Mind, which is a first novel also. And I read a review of it, and it's about a woman who is a surgeon, and she has Alzheimer's. So she has retired, and she's quite young. She's only in her 60s, but she has Alzheimer's. And what happens is that her best friend, who lives 2 doors away from her, is found murdered. And one odd thing about the murder is that 4 fingers of one of the hands was surgically removed. And so the suspicion has fallen on this woman. But of course, she has Alzheimer's, so she can't remember what the hell she's done, you know. Reason I'm interested, my mother has Alzheimer's, so I'm watching this on a daily basis. And I've tried writing about Alzheimer's in fiction, and I couldn't. I finally started writing about Alzheimer's in nonfiction, creative nonfiction. I've written a few essays about my mother, because it's a very strange situation, watching somebody you know not able to remember 5 minutes after she's eaten that she's eaten. But she still remembers who I am. Every time I come in, she looks at me and she looks very assured because she knows who I am. But she can't remember, and I know she's forgetting more and more and more. And it's a very modern condition, Alzheimer's. You know, people used to die at 40 because 40 was old. Today, you know, my mother is 92 years old. You know, I mean, she's very healthy. The only problem is her mind hasn't sort of kept up with that. And then I know other people who live to like, you know, 95, and they're an invalid, and they need all kinds of, like a good friend of mine, her mother died at 99, but she had her mind right up to the end. But she was an invalid. And my girlfriend had to look after her because, you know, she was just medically, physical condition was bad. So this is what we have to look forward to as we grow old, and I think it is important to think about it, and that's one of the reasons I'm reading that.
Yeah, this is kind of 2 questions in one, but how long did it take you to finish your first novel, and how did you know it was finished?
I finished the first novel in 2 weeks. I thought I knew everything about writing a book. And then I looked at it. I thought, now what do I do? Because I had left my job, gone away to Greece, and I was going to write this book. And 2 weeks later, I was finished. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I eventually rewrote that novel. I then entered an MFA program at Massachusetts. I then rewrote that novel. So in total, it took me about 4 years. By that time, I knew it was finished. I had an agent for it who represented it. Several editors looked at it and sent me nice complimentary notes, but nobody bought it. It's still sitting there. I wrote 2 more books that nobody bought either. But the third one actually won me a fellowship. So I just kept going. The 4th book I finally published, but I didn't think I wasn't looking for a publisher at the time. It just happened by chance. So life is long. I started young. If you start a little older, I would say be a little bit more careful and think about what it is you really want to write, because you can spend an awful lot of time doing practice work that's a waste of time. I didn't know what I was doing. Actually, the very, very first book I tried to write, I never finished. I wrote about 100 pages. I was 19. It was set in Rio de Janeiro, but I had never been to Rio de Janeiro. So it's very interesting that I should think that I could write a book in Rio de Janeiro. So anyway, I was using my imagination, you know. Sure, right. Well, I think, you know, you have to be imaginative as a teacher. I have a friend who's an Austen scholar. And so, you know, she's teaching everything by Jane Austen. And one thing she does is, besides just making them read the book, she shows them movies like Clueless and Pride and Prejudice and Vampires, you know. So, in other words, she acknowledges the importance of Austen through further things in modern renditions of it. So, I don't know the answer to that, I have to be honest. I don't teach young people like that. And I know it's challenging, but, you know.
If there are no more questions, this is the end of the workshop. There will be a book signing session for those who are interested in Su Xi's work. Before you go, please leave us your name and contact details by filling in the form out. You will receive a certificate of completion of this workshop, issued by the City University of Hong Kong's Department of English. Once again, on behalf of the HKTDC, I would like to thank Su Xi and all of you for joining us today. Thank you.